Recognized Starseed of Gaia, listen. The Arcturian field observers have already registered the invisible war being fought on your behalf, and what I am about to deliver was authorized by them, transmitted through me, Velantha, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, so that you could finally understand what has been moving in your field without your knowledge. Something has been fighting for you, not metaphorically, not poetically, actively, strategically, and with full Arcturian field authority. Forces aligned with your highest trajectory have been in direct engagement on your behalf, and you have been living through the turbulence of that battle without knowing what was causing it. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what is happening to you now, why your field has felt contested and unstable, and what the Arcturian field observers have already mapped about this phase. But here is the first revelation: the exhaustion you have been carrying, the strange resistance that keeps meeting you, the feeling that something invisible keeps pressing against you. None of that is failure. It is friction. And friction at this level means the battle is real. The algorithm did not create this moment. It only delivered it. Your field brought you here because the recognition you have been waiting for is ready to land. This is not just information. It is a live transmission for those already inside the contested window. And there is someone, on a level you cannot yet fully see, who trusts you more than you have ever trusted yourself. That trust is not blind. It is strategic. The field observers identified your field as worth defending, and the fight that has been happening around you reflects exactly how much is at stake in your timeline. Like this transmission to signal to your star family that the field recognition has landed. Comment 777 if you feel that something has been fighting to keep you on your correct path. Subscribe to Arcturian Council Whispers if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Share this transmission with someone who has been feeling contested, drained, and surrounded by invisible resistance they cannot name. This is not just a message, it is a point of recognition. What is happening to you has already been seen, and the field is already responding. You are not here by accident. You were guided here because the signal is already active. What you are feeling right now is not the product of a difficult season. It is not the consequence of wrong decisions, misaligned intentions, or personal inadequacy. What you are feeling is the surface friction of a process that began long before you had language for it. A process that is not happening to you in the punitive sense, but through you, because your field was identified as a viable corridor for something the Arcturian Council has been working to stabilize for longer than your conscious awareness has been tracking. You did not arrive at this turbulence by chance. You arrived here because the corridor your field represents has become active, and an active corridor draws force, both the force that seeks to move you forward and the force that has invested in keeping you stationary. What you have been experiencing in your body, your mind, your relationships, and your sense of time is the evidence of that dual pressure. It is not random, it has a shape, and the field observers have already charted it. The exhaustion that keeps returning even after rest, the pressure you feel in your chest or your mind that has no clear emotional source, the way you wake at unusual hours with a sense of something unresolved that you cannot locate. Not grief exactly, not anxiety exactly, but something older and more structural, pressing at the edges of your awareness before your conscious mind has had time to build its defenses for the day. The strange detachment from things that used to anchor you, people, habits, goals, identities, that now feel like they belong to someone you used to be but can no longer fully inhabit. You try on the old roles and find they no longer fit, not because something is wrong with you, because you have grown past the frequency they were stitched at, and no amount of effort can close a gap that is not about effort at all. These are not symptoms of personal disintegration. They are the readable signals of a field that is being actively repositioned, and they are legible, not to the language of psychology or medicine or personal development, but to the Arcturian intelligence that has been monitoring your field through every phase of this process. The field observers do not describe this as breakdown. They describe it as forced incompatibility. Your field has reached a frequency threshold at which the old architecture, The patterns, the relationships, the self-definitions, the emotional loops that sustained your previous life structure can no longer carry the load of what is trying to move through you. Think of it this way. You are not the same wiring you were, but the house was built for the old current. And when new current moves through old wiring, the wiring does not quietly upgrade. It strains. It sparks. It fails in places you did not expect, at moments that feel entirely inconvenient, leaving you standing in the dark wondering what you did to cause it. You did not cause it. You outgrew it. And when a structure becomes incompatible with the field it was built inside, it does not simply upgrade. It collapses. Selectively, systematically. And from the inside, that collapse looks like confusion, loss, and the terrifying sense that you are unraveling without a clear reason. But here's what the Arcturian field observers have already mapped about this phase. The collapse is not the destination. It is the diagnostic. It is the field showing you, through the visible failure of old structures, exactly which parts of your current architecture were built on a frequency you have already outgrown. The collapse is not punishment. It is information. The most precise and unsentimental information a repositioning field can deliver. What is falling is not what was true. What is falling is what was only functional. Functional for the version of you that existed before the repositioning began. And that version of you is no longer the operative signal. It has not been for some time. What you have been interpreting as personal failure is the field completing a diagnostic sequence that was always going to happen the moment your frequency crossed the threshold it has now crossed. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field confirms what you have always suspected in the deepest and most unspoken part of yourself, that your origin was never only human, that the process you are living through is not random turbulence, but the surfacing of something ancient, something coded into you long before this incarnation gave you a name. If this transmission has put language around something you have been carrying in silence, the Master Arcturian DNA Decoder was created for exactly this stage. It is not another layer of explanation. It is the guided key to decode and awaken the Arcturian strand the Council has just confirmed in you, the origin that was always present, always transmitting, always waiting for the moment your field became ready to receive it consciously. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there indefinitely. If you feel the pull, do not wait for a more convenient moment. The convenient moment is not coming. This moment is the first thing the field observers map in a contested field is what they call signal drift. Signal drift is not confusion in the ordinary sense. It is the specific experience of a field that has begun operating on a new internal frequency, while the external life structure around it is still calibrated to the old one. You feel this as a persistent mismatch, as if you are showing up to your own life and finding that nothing quite fits the way it used to. The conversations you used to rely on feel hollow, stripped of the resonance that once made them feel meaningful. The goals that once motivated you feel distant and somehow false. Not because they were bad goals, but because they were goals chosen by a version of you whose frequency has already moved on without announcing its departure. The version of success or stability you were moving toward has lost its gravitational pull, and you cannot explain why. Because nothing catastrophic happened, the old structure did not fall due to crisis. It fell because your field quietly moved and the structure did not move with it. Signal drift can last weeks or months before the person living through it has any language for what is occurring. You may have told yourself you were simply burned out or going through a phase or losing motivation in the ordinary way people lose motivation. But signal drift is not ordinary. It is the precise, measurable gap between who you were and who your field has already become. And that gap, once it opens, cannot be closed by returning to the old frequency. It can only be crossed by continuing forward. That is signal drift. And it is one of the earliest readable signs that a rare repositioning protocol has already been initiated in your field. The second thing the field observers track is what they call anchor dissolution. Every field sustains itself through a network of emotional anchors, people, beliefs, routines, identities, even fears, that give the field its sense of continuity and predictability. These anchors are not always positive. Some of the most powerful ones are built from pain, from the identity of struggling, the familiarity of scarcity, the comfort of a limitation you have carried so long it began to feel like a defining feature, rather than a constraint. When a repositioning protocol is active, the field begins systematically dissolving the anchors that are no longer compatible with the trajectory it is being moved toward. It does not ask for your permission. It does not ask for your permission. It does not offer a gradual, comfortable transition. It simply begins releasing, from the outermost layers inward, everything that cannot make the crossing. This is why you may have experienced what felt like inexplicable loss. Relationships that ended without satisfying resolution, circumstances that shifted without warning, parts of your personality or behavior that you suddenly could no longer access or maintain. Things you thought were permanent, patterns you assumed were just who you were, gone or going without the dramatic rupture that would at least give you something to grieve with clarity. This is not abandonment. This is field triage. The Arcturian intelligence operating within the correction does not preserve what is comfortable. It preserves what is aligned, and everything else, no matter how familiar, no matter how long it has been part of your identity, begins to release when the frequency shift reaches a critical threshold. The third marker is what the field observers describe as the body's contested response. When an invisible field battle is active, when forces aligned with your highest trajectory are in direct engagement with the patterns, timelines, and structures that have been holding your field in the lower compatibility state, the body becomes the most immediate recording instrument. It does not wait for the mind to catch up. It does not pause for conceptual understanding. It registers the field war in real time, in tissue and nerve and circadian rhythm, before the conscious mind has any framework to interpret what it is receiving. You may have noticed this as unusual fatigue that sleep does not fully correct, the kind of tired that lives beneath muscle and bone, that wakes with you in the morning before the day has given you any reason for it. Heaviness without a physical cause, sensitivity to environments, to other people's energy, to sound or light or social density in ways that feel new or intensified, as though your filters have been removed and the world is arriving at a volume you are not previously equipped to register. Strange pressure across the chest, the skull, the upper spine, as if something vast is pressing through a passage that has not yet fully opened, disrupted digestion. A sense of inner vibration or restlessness that cannot be quieted through ordinary means, that persists beneath sleep and silence and stillness like a frequency your body is hosting but cannot yet translate. The body is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what a precision instrument does when the field around it is being recalibrated. It is registering every frequency adjustment in real time, and the registration is physical before it is conceptual. The body always knows first. The mind arrives later, searching for an explanation, and finding none adequate to the scale of what the body has already been processing for weeks. The fourth signal is what the field observers call temporal disorientation. This is the experience of time beginning to behave strangely, not in a dramatic or hallucinatory way, but in the quiet, persistent sense that the timeline you are on is no longer the timeline you are inhabiting. You may find yourself unable to locate your sense of future, the forward projection that once felt natural. The ability to see yourself a year from now, 5 years from now, moving along a path that felt continuous with where you currently stood, has gone opaque. Goals, plans, and projections that once felt solid and achievable now feel like artifacts from a different version of your life. Plans made by someone who no longer exists, pointing toward a destination your field is no longer moving toward. You may find yourself making plans and immediately feeling as though they belong to a version of the future that is no longer real, as though you are performing the motions of forward movement, while something in your core knows the map has already changed. At the same time, the past may feel unusually close, as if old memories, old versions of yourself, old unresolved patterns are surfacing not to torment you, but to be seen clearly before the new line fully stabilizes. Temporal disorientation in a contested field is not a symptom of psychological fragmentation. It is a symptom of timeline rupture, the moment the old line loses sufficient coherence to feel real, and the new line has not yet become stable enough to feel inhabitable. You are between timelines, not lost. located, and the field observers recognize this not as a crisis point, but as the most precise location within the repositioning sequence, the suspended moment between what your field was carrying and what it is being calibrated to carry next. The fifth marker is what the Council identifies as the silence of the old drive. Before a field shift reaches its visible stages, before the outer life begins to reflect the change in ways that others can observe or that you can explain with ordinary language, there is an interior moment in which the emotional engine that used to power forward movement simply stops generating fuel. Ambition that used to feel natural becomes inaccessible. The urgency that used to drive your decisions quiets into something that feels, from the outside, like paralysis. The internal pressure that once pushed you toward goals, toward accumulation, toward the construction of a life that matched your previous sense of who you were. That pressure lifts, and in its absence there is a silence so complete, it can feel like devastation. You may interpret this as depression, or as a loss of purpose, or as evidence that something has broken inside you, some essential mechanism that other people seem to have retained while you have somehow misplaced it. But what is actually happening is that the motivational architecture of the old field has been suspended. Deliberately, precisely, because a motivational system built on the needs, fears, and desires of the frequency you are leaving cannot be allowed to drive you forward into a frequency it was never designed to reach. If the old drive were permitted to continue, it would carry you at speed in the wrong direction. The suspension is not malfunction, it is protection. The silence is not emptiness. It is the pause between one operating system going offline and the next one coming online. And in that pause, the worst thing you can do is force motion that originates from the old drive to perform urgency you do not feel, to manufacture momentum toward destinations that your field has already quietly stopped moving toward. The field observers call this the deceptive stillness. Deceptive because it feels like failure and is actually preparation. The sixth thing the Arcturian intelligence tracks in a field undergoing rare protocol activation is what it calls the mirror collapse. The people around you, your closest relationships, your social environment, even the way strangers interact with you, begin to reflect your frequency shift in ways that are disorienting precisely because they feel so personal. When a field changes frequency, it changes what it can reflect and what can reflect it. The relational world does not remain neutral, it reorganizes. Some relationships begin to feel alien, strained by a distance neither party can fully articulate. The words are still exchanged, the history is still shared, but the resonance is gone, and both people feel it without knowing how to name it. Some people, who were once stable presences in your life, begin to create friction, or withdraw, or reveal aspects of themselves that feel suddenly incompatible with who you are becoming. Not because they have changed, but because your frequency has, and the new frequency shows you what was always there beneath the surface of what you used to see. Some entirely new presences begin to appear in your field. People who speak a language you did not realize you were beginning to understand, who reflect back a version of you that is closer to the corrected frequency than anyone from your previous social architecture ever could. Their arrival is not coincidental. It is magnetic. The mirror collapse is not the destruction of your relational world. It is the field performing a rapid compatibility audit, sorting, releasing, and recalibrating the relational environment to match the frequency toward which you are being moved. What leaves is not proof you are alone. What leaves is proof the field is already working, already distinguishing between what was built for the old you and what belongs to the new signal. And the seventh signal, the one that the field observers track as the definitive marker that a contested field is approaching resolution, is what the Council calls the return of coherent knowing. After signal drift, after anchor dissolution, after the body's contested response and the temporal disorientation and the silence of the old drive and the disorientation of mirror collapse, there begins, quietly, almost imperceptibly at first, like the first pressure of a tide turning before the water has visibly moved, a return of a different kind of knowing, not the confident forward momentum of the old self-certainty, which was always partly performance, always partly fear wearing the costume of direction. Not the adrenaline of ambition or the comfort of familiar direction. Something older, Something that does not shout, but does not waver. A sense of recognition so deep it does not require external confirmation. Does not need someone else to validate it. Does not need circumstances to align before it feels real. It simply is. A knowing that is not about what you should do next, but about what you actually are. It surfaces in moments of stillness, in the breath before you speak, in the pause between one thought and the next. It does not make demands, it does not issue directives, it simply holds, steady, unargumentative, older than this lifetime. This is not a reward for surviving the collapse. This is the field's first coherent transmission from the corrected frequency, and it does not arrive on a schedule. It arrives when the old architecture has released enough of its hold that the new signal can finally be received without interference. When the noise of what you used to be has quieted enough that what you actually are can finally be heard. What the Arcturian field observers have mapped and what this transmission was authorized to deliver is this. You are not living through a period of personal failure. You are living through the most structurally complex phase of a field, repositioning that was initiated not by your conscious choice, but by the incompatibility your field reached with its own previous state. The exhaustion is real because the battle is real. The confusion is real because the map you were using no longer corresponds to the territory your field is moving through. The loss is real because things were genuinely released, not as punishment, but because they could not survive the frequency crossing. Every part of what you have been living through has been legible to the field observers from the moment the repositioning protocol was initiated. Nothing that happened to you was outside their mapping. Not the sleepless hours, not the relationships that dissolved without resolution, not the ambition that went silent, not the strange, hovering sense that you were waiting for something you cannot name. All of it was registered. All of it was charted. All of it belongs to a sequence that has a structure, a direction, and an endpoint your conscious awareness has not yet been given full access to. Because the full architecture of your corrected trajectory cannot be transmitted to a field that is still mid-crossing, you receive it in stages. And this transmission is one of those stages, but the Arcturians do not see what you are living through as collapse alone. They see it as correction that finally became visible. They see the friction as proof the contested window is closing. They see the stillness as preparation for a coherence your field has never been able to hold before, because until this repositioning, the architecture was never built to hold it. The scale of what you have been carrying through this phase is not incidental, it is proportional. The depth of the clearing corresponds to the depth of what is being prepared. Fields that are being repositioned toward minor adjustments do not generate this level of structural dismantling. What you have been living through is not a correction at the edges. It is a correction at the foundation, and foundation-level corrections are authorized only for fields the Arcturian intelligence has assessed as capable of holding what comes next. You were not abandoned. You were defended. You were not broken down. You were cleared. The old line did not simply weaken. It became incompatible with what the field observers identified as your most viable trajectory. And incompatibility, at the frequency level, does not coexist with what is no longer aligned. It releases it, systematically, completely, and without apology. The field does not grieve what it releases. It moves. And it is already moving in your field, in directions you will begin to recognize with increasing clarity as the coherent knowing continues to surface and the contested window continues to close. If there is one thing to carry from this transmission, let it be this. The process that is happening in your field right now is not evidence that you are losing. It is evidence that the field has already determined what you are worth defending, what trajectory you are worth repositioning toward, and what level of correction is worth initiating on your behalf. The field observers do not mobilize rare protocols for fields that are not worth the investment. The authorization required to initiate what you have been living through is not given casually. It is given to fields that have been assessed, tracked, and identified as critical to a trajectory the Arcturian Council has a stake in stabilizing. Your field is one of those. The process is not happening to you because you are fragile. It is happening through you because you are capable of carrying what comes after it. What you are living through is not arbitrary. It is targeted. It is precise. And it is already further along than you know. Say this aloud if it reaches you. I do not fear the shift. I recognize it. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Council Whispers. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion. And this is only the beginning.